I met you at WBBM and I didn't know who you were. I'm very sorry. But then you told me
That's
that.
okay. Most people don't.
Well, no, I mean, I saw you, but I didn't know you by sight. So, but what are you? Okay, first of all, you look like 30, but I know you're
Oh,
older than
please. I am 62 and feeling every bit of it.
Oh gosh. Yeah, so
But
what's your secret to staying young?
first off, 5 kids, 4 grandkids. That'll do it right there. And that keeps me young. Plus this business, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Doesn't it
why do you
keep
think
us
that is?
young?
Because I met other people. I met people in their 70s who seem a lot younger.
Well, okay. Being that I've done mostly top 40
Right.
and, classic hits type formats for most of my career, um, we're kind of immature as people. And I married a child psychologist.
Ooh.
So that works out really well since I still act like a child. So it works out well.
No, but what do you think it is about this business? Like, because is it because people enjoy it? Because I mean, now the
My
business is
my
very
wife
different.
is staring at me now. She just came into the room and it's like, what are you even talking about? But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, is it because you think people enjoy it? Because I know that the business, everybody tells me the business has changed. It's very corporate. It's boring. It used to be so fun, and then my counter is, yeah, was it fun that the guys were saying things or doing things and saying things and getting away with it? And of course, some of the women were too. So, but what do you think it is about the business?
Well, first off, everything you just said is true. All of it. It was much more fun back in the 80s when I was in Detroit back then. And it was, but there were so many bad things about it back then. There was a lot of payola going on. I
Ooh.
was a program director back in the 80s at a top 40 station that was well known throughout the country at the time because of my morning guy, not anything to do with me, but our morning guy, we were paying $1 million a year at the time. And
Whoa.
back in the 80s, that was a lot of money.
That's a lot.
Now
That's like a
that's a lot of
billion.
money.
Well, now, yeah, even, I mean, shoot, if I were even making, yeah, if I were even making X, I'd still be making good money. But yeah, $1 million back then was incredible.
Yeah, I would sign off on, we paid him monthly. It's Dick Purton, by the way, in Detroit. Anybody from Detroit knows Dick Purton. He was the Johnny Carson of radio. Oh, for you millennials, Johnny Carson was a night show host before Jimmy Kimmel. He was the Jimmy Kimmel of radio. But I would sign off on his paychecks every month, and his monthly checks were way more than I made in a whole year.
Wow.
But he was worth every penny of it. But back then, to get back to your question, it was so much fun back then, but there was so much payola involved. In fact, ABC did a big story, and I was young. I was like 26 years old when I was programming this huge station, and I didn't know what I was doing, but it didn't matter because I had the best morning guy in the world. And ABC did a story on payola, and payola, to pay to have records play for those who don't know. And it's illegal, but many program directors were doing that back then. And I had plenty of offers, but I was the only one that would give an interview to ABC about this because everybody else, well, I'm not going to say they were on the take, but they didn't want to be interviewed. And most
Wait,
were under FBI investigation in my market at the time.
ABC, you mean ABC National News is doing an investigation?
No, this was, well, it was the local ABC station. It was WXYZ in Detroit. And the reporter was Gene Taylor. Full disclosure, Gene Taylor was also our morning show producer at the radio station. And in fact, he made a ton of money at ABC, the ABC station there back in the 80s as a reporter. And then I paid him $90,000 to produce for Dick Purton.
Wow.
And then Dick Purton paid him even more on
Wow.
top of that out of his salary. Because
Wait, why did he pay him more? How come he got a salary from you and then?
Well, because Gene Taylor was probably the best radio producer ever. He wrote wonderful comedy. He was a stand-up comedian. He was just a brilliant producer. So yeah, we paid him a lot of money to make sure Dick Burton show stayed #1, and it was #1 all the time. It made my job so easy as a program director. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, it was so much fun back then, but there were so many drugs involved, payola, yeah, so many things wrong with the business. But at least radio itself, I thought was way better back then.
Okay. Well, first of all, I put in my Twitter. It's twitter.com/radiogirlpod. If you want to share that with your thousands of followers on Twitter, because I know
Yes.
in the chat, I put it in there. Have you used Zoom, right? Because you can just copy it. But
Yes.
anyway, yeah. But anyway, so yeah.
How do I pop that in? You know, I'm an old timer, Margaret. I
Oh,
don't know how to do these things.
okay. Well, okay. Is your Twitter open up?
No, it is not.
Well, you can just open up your Twitter and retweet what we're doing. But anyway, oh, you don't know how to do that?
I'm doing this on my phone while you're talking to me.
Ooh,
So
okay.
continue.
Okay. But anyway, so how come what made a good producer back then?
Well, first off, Dick Burton had guests on constantly. He was a comedy show.
Right.
It was very local. We had a mayor, Coleman A. Young was our mayor. He was about 72 years old at the time, but he had shady deals going.
Wow.
Not saying if they were true or not, but he was in the news constantly. So Dick Burton had one of his voice characters that would do Coleman A. Young, and he did it to a spitting image of Coleman himself.
Wow.
And one day, Coleman A. Young, the mayor, actually called in on the show as a joke. And so both were doing the voice, and Dick Burton didn't know it. But anyway, these were the kind of things that Gene Taylor would set up. We had Casey Kasem, and we had Jim Oakes. And Casey, by the way, was good friends with Dick Burton. And Jim Oakes, one of our voice guys, did Casey so good. He was even on the Tonight Show at one time, and Johnny Carson was asking him, well, who does the best impression? And Casey Kasem even said, well, there's a guy in Detroit, Jim Oakes, who does me, who's spot on.
Wow.
And in fact, they would be on at the same time talking to each other, and you couldn't tell the difference between the two. But Gene Taylor would sit next to Dick Burton, and he would constantly feed him lines to live interviews, you know, good just punchlines and things to ask. And well, that's a good producer. And he would bring in the best guest. We would have everybody on that show. It was just incredible. And it was really when radio was so good and so live. You know, today most of our music stations are voice tracked. None of them are live anymore, hardly, just a few. That's why it's so refreshing to be at BBM. I'm doing live traffic reports, and I'm like, I haven't done live radio in so long. This is so hard. But I think live radio was so much better, don't you? It was.
Yeah, I mean, as a listener,
so
I didn't work in it.
spontaneous.
Yeah, that's what I like about it. I mean, it seems like I was growing up when it was really fun and live. And also my parents were much older, so they knew about old time radio. Like I would listen to old time radio on Saturday on eventually WNIB, but first what became the Drive. And yeah, what's his name? Chuck Shaden. And so they would say, oh yeah, I remember this. And I just was really into it. But yeah, there was a lot of creativity and so forth. But it just sounds like the business, I know people say it was really fun, but it just sounds like the business it had a lot of dysfunction in it. And I know it's great. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you sort of had to put that aside and be in the business. It seems like if you had different sensibilities. And I think that would sort of bother me if I worked in that situation.
Yeah, well, it was tough because it was very political too. Well, it is today as well.
It was political, like political. You mean like office politics?
Office politics, exactly. And political the other way, depending on what format you were working. But it was just so, you know, lot of backstabbing in the business back then. It was a bigger deal. Radio was so much more relevant back then. You know, I mean, everybody listened to the radio. Even the millennials today, back then, that age group listened to radio, you know, and everything you did had an impact. You know, you really were a part of the community, and everybody, you know, listened to radio back then. We didn't have Facebook and all these other digital, you know, music out sources, and radio was it. That was it for your music entertainment, unless you had a Walkman. A Walkman was this little thing. No, people know what a Walkman was.
Well, Walkman looked like it literally played tapes, and it just looked like a tape player, cassette player, and people put it in their ears and they walked around with it.
Yes, yes.
That's why it's called a Walkman.
Exactly.
But okay, so let's break it down for a second. It just sounds like radio, what it used to be like just the entertainment business. Like, you know, Hollywood was, you know, Hollywood has a lot of creative people in it, a lot of ideas, you know, being thrown out there. And radio was too. It sounds like it was really, really important to be very creative and be cutting edge and be relevant.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, you had a lot of competition, especially before back in the early 90s, we came up with the Telecommunications Act. And basically what that said was that owners could own as many radio stations as they wanted to, TV, newspaper. And right before that, in the 80s, you were only allowed to own one AM, one FM station, and one newspaper and one television station if you were a big company in each market. So it made it incredibly competitive. You know, back in the 80s in Detroit, when top 40 pop radio was the big format, we had 3 different stations that had that format. And so you had to be great. And it was a big competition. There were a lot of advertising dollars going for that same demo. So you had to be really good or you didn't survive. But now, you know, it's so watered down because owners can own as many as they want, and jobs were eliminated. So you'd have one program director looking over all these different radio stations. And now you have radio personalities that are at one station, and then they voice track for many other stations, eliminating more jobs. And when they were selling that Telecommunications Act bill back in the early 90s, oh, no, it will create more jobs. And, you know, of course, we were all screaming, no, this is going to eliminate jobs. And of course it did.
Okay, so why did they want that passed? And why did they say there would be more jobs created?
Because of corporate America, the big companies. They made more money. They bought up more radio stations and had bigger control and could sell more advertising, make more advertising dollars because they had all these numerous stations nationwide, and within each big market, they could own as many as they wanted. So the big money corporations bought all these radio stations, and, you know, then they kind of controlled the market because they'd have their top 40 station, their classic hits station, their rock station, but they made sure they didn't compete with each other. So it kind of watered down the business, if that makes sense.
But then what's interesting is that they didn't make billions of dollars as a result of this. They went into bankruptcy.
Well, they did. But at first they did make big money, and these big corporations were bringing in big cash. Then you had, you know, your Clear Channels, now iHeart, and all these other big companies that, yeah, they got into trouble because radio stations, the value was so blown up. You know, at one time, I remember even in the 2000s when I was at Bonneville, and now it's Hubbard, even 100.3, that particular frequency would have gone for $160 million. Is that not outrageous? I
Yeah.
don't think they could get even a tenth of that now because the values have gone down because the income from all these stations from the advertising has gone down because radio listening isn't as big as it was back then. But these stations had enormous values. And so that's, they bought up all these stations at these big prices that it dropped. And now they're all in bankruptcy trying to dig their way out.
Well, back then well, first of all, I do know of some people who did have more independent stations and they became multimillionaires after they sold them. I mean, who wouldn't want to sell your station for millions of dollars and then you could do whatever you wanted?
Well,
So,
it was you brought up the drive. And when I was with Bonneville, they bought those frequencies or that one frequency 96.9 because here the drive here is 97.1, but when you drive up to Wisconsin, then you switch over to 96.9 and you can continue to listen. Like if we ever go to Lake what's in Wisconsin, the big Lake Geneva. Lake Geneva, thank you. You switch over to 96.9 and you can listen to it even on the lake. But that was a ma and pa operation. They had that station forever and ever and ever. And we bought it for, I think that was about 150 million. I may be off on that, but it was way up there from that couple. And of course, they retired very nicely.
Yeah.
They were done with it, and now those frequencies aren't worth anywhere near that.
Yeah, but back then, so are you saying that they made a lot of money because the advertising they would have no competition in the same market and then the advertising was more national, or how did they work that out?
Well, it's national and local. I mean, we sell even here, for the company you and I work for, we sell national buys and then you have your local buys. You have your network, and usually the network deals are kind of a barter thing. You have different programs that you carry, and then you have to have a couple of their spots, and there are all different kinds of ways to do the national buys, but then you add your local buys to that. And back in the day, again, that made a lot of money, revenue. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Revenue.
No, revenue has dropped tremendously, and especially when, the pandemic hit. That really, that hurt everybody. But especially radio stations. Well, I shouldn't say that, especially everybody. I mean, we all took a hit after.
Well, some companies did very well. I mean, not radio, but some companies that were in certain businesses did extremely well because of the pandemic, because people were staying at home and they needed certain things. So.
Sure. And even all the way down to restaurants. I remember during the pandemic, when we were all, staying at home and we had to wear masks everywhere. And I remember my wife and I, we took our kids and got in the car one day and drove to Superdog here in Chicago.
I go there all the time.
I love Superdog, is my favorite.
Superdog, that was a great place to go because it was safe to go to.
Yes. And my wife grew up here, and she, of course, lived in that neighborhood growing up, by the way, and, would go there with her friends all the time. So it's kind of a nostalgic thing for us. And so we went there, and it's a drive-in, by the way, for those who haven't been to Superdog. It's like an old-fashioned drive-in, and you order from your car, and they bring it out to your car, and the best Chicago dogs ever to get a Superdog. And it comes in a little box with these crinkle fries that are so good. And now I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. But anyway, we would go there, and that place was packed because that was a place you could go. And remember, many restaurants were closed. They had to close down completely. But Superdog exploded. That place was so busy, and they still do great to this day. Not that they didn't do well before, but I think the pandemic really helped them.
It did. Yeah. They did they did incredible because we would go there too. We went there. Eventually we felt safe enough to leave our little area, and we went up there, and it was absolutely packed because you could stay in your car. So
exactly. And totally safe because you're in your car, and it's fun. It's a fun for anybody in Chicago. If you've never been to Superdog, you must go. The
No,
best.
there's one in Chicago in the Northwest side. There's also one in Wheeling. The Wheeling one is really good as well. And it's
I haven't
bigger,
been to
but
the Wheeling one. Really? Oh, okay. I'll
it's
have to check.
newer, it's bigger. But the thing is, it's still the same concept and
Sure.
it's really nice. And the quality is the same. They used to have one at Midway Airport, a little outlet, and it wasn't very good. I don't think they're there anymore. But okay, so let's go back to radio because,
Yes.
it's nice to talk to people who used to work in radio in the early days.
Sure.
So when did you start in radio?
Oh boy, now I'm really dating myself. 1979,
Whoa.
and I was still in school, and we played these things called records, vinyl.
No, vinyl's still popular among certain
I
people. It's like a
know.
hipster thing. Yeah.
Yeah, my son in college goes to McGill in Montreal. He loves vinyl. He has a record player in his room, and yeah, it totally made a comeback, which I love. I'm so happy about that. But yeah, at my first station, we actually queued up records on turntables and played music from that. And I was still in school at the time, and actually was on a TV show locally produced in Virginia, and it was Cobweb Theater with the Bowman Body, like Svengoolie here in Chicago. It was Cobweb Theater there, and it was on all the cable stations throughout Virginia. We were on every Friday night, and I was the Bowman Body's sidekick, Inspector Pitt, a British guy, and I had a horrible British accent, and I would come in and say, "Pitt here, hello, Bowman," and we would do little bits, and it
How did you
was.
get in?
What's that?
How did you get on into that?
Well, Bill Bowman, who was and is the Bowman Body. He's still around in Virginia, not doing the Bowman Body anymore, but he was a broadcaster. He was a TV producer and director. And he was friends with my parents, and he got me in the business. And I was going to an engineering school in Virginia to do behind the scenes and television and camera work. And so Bill got me hooked up with this company, Rust Home Productions in Virginia, and we produced the Cobweb Theater. So I ended up being a sidekick. I did voice for TV commercials we would produce back then, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, we had a good time. I made no money, didn't care, because we just had a good time. We would go to lunch and write our scripts on little napkins, and then we would go and produce the show. And it was mostly ad lib, but it was a lot of fun. Never do that anymore,
Right.
especially in television. Everything is all so planned out, but this was just all ad lib and fun, and it was a good time. And horrible movies we would do. Yes.
Right. And then how long did you do that for?
Oh, it was short-lived. I was 19 years old, and so that production company was hurting financially, and a radio station offered me weekends in Virginia. And I was talking to Bill Bowman, the Bowman Body, and he said, take it, Pitt. And he would always call me Pitt. Take it, Pitt. You got to take it. And so I did. And then the company did go under. And I worked 2 weeks, I think, at that station, and they offered me full time, and I stayed in radio. I had a blast doing it. Radio was so fun then. You had to really think, because nothing was digital. Today, we play our music digitally. But back then, you had to queue up records. You had to pull out your commercials and put them in little cart machines, and you had no free time. So you had to think constantly. It was fun. It was silly, but fun. I had a good time doing it.
Now, do you think it was fun also because you were young?
Yes.
You're a teenager, or was it fun
Yes.
just because it really was fun?
Both. I was young, I was a teenager, and radio was so popular. And, I could, people were excited that you did that. And they would come out to see you when you did appearances, want to take pictures with you. And I was such a young kid, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And it really wasn't making much money back then, but I didn't care at all. I just had such a good time doing it. I did it for the love of it. And then it did eventually pay, went into major markets and started making money back when radio paid really well. And it was a good time. And I liked it. I still like it today, even. I have such a good time. And I do, a weekend shift at another. Can I mention the other radio
Of
stations?
course.
Yeah, at 94.7.
Well, this is my
WLS.
podcast. This is not a corporate
Yeah.
podcast. So
So I do weekends at 94.7 WLS, which is classic hits. And
Mhm.
all those songs were new when I played them on the radio back in Detroit in the 80s. So it's so nostalgic for me and so much fun to still do that. And I do enjoy working at that station because they do a really good job. They're really good. We have really good on-air personalities there. Dave Fogel, Dave and Kim in the morning. And Dave and I have worked together at 4 different radio stations from back in the 80s in Detroit to here in Chicago. And we just have wonderful, wonderful personalities there, and they have a good time. And by the way, he's still live in the morning. I was talking about everybody voice tracking, but he's still live. And that's a good thing. That keeps radio a little bit relevant still. But yeah, I still enjoy it. I do.
Well, yeah, but you went, okay, so you just sort of skip over because like you said, you went to Virginia and then you were in the major markets, but how did you get to the major markets? I mean, were there a lot of people going for the same jobs and it's super competitive? Okay, so what was that like?
Wow.
What was that like?
Yeah. I was blessed though. Hey,
Yeah, but doesn't it take also talent? Because it's not just because there's so many people going for it.
Sure. Yeah, it does take talent, but I was always the right place at the right time.
So what does that mean?
Thanks be to God. Just, when openings came up and I happened to be working with someone who, knew someone in a different market, and they said, oh, this guy is who you should hire.
Mhm.
And I would get hired. So when I was in Virginia, I was at Richmond, Virginia. And so from there, I went to Columbus, Ohio, and it was a new adult contemporary station. Adult contemporary formats back then, 1982, or 1980, 81, 82, I think I was there in Columbus, and worked at Sunny 95, and we became the biggest station there. And I was doing middays, and it was a big deal for me because I was usually a night jock. And so I got this midday thing there, and our ratings were great, and I did well, but then it just didn't work out. I didn't get along with the new PD. The PD that hired me got fired. Then this new guy came in. This is where we talk about politics. And the new guy and I butted heads. And I finally just went in and put in my resignation 2 weeks before Christmas because I didn't want to work on Christmas Day. And I left there. And then I followed the PD that had hired me down to North Carolina and worked at a rock station there, KZL, North Carolina's best rock. Worked there a couple of years. And then in 1984, I worked with Big Steve Kelly there briefly. We became friends. He went to Detroit to Z95.5, home of Dick Purton. And then they needed a midday guy. And he said, oh, I have a guy. And so they flew me up. I interviewed at the airport. They hired me right there on the job. In fact, they had 2 contracts. Lee Douglas was the program director. He had 2 contracts in his coat. And he said, we'll offer you this. And I said, oh, I was thinking more like this. And by the way, it wasn't even that much back then. I don't care talking about it. He says, well, we'll give you 30 grand. And this was 1984. We'll give you 30 grand to do it. I said, well, I was thinking more like, can't we go up to 33? And he said, son of a bleep, I knew you were going to do that. Here you go. And he throws down the contract. And so you're hired. And I was like, great. That's how it worked back then. Now it's much more involved. And I went up to Detroit, and then salary just went up, up, up. The general sales manager was Betty Pazdernick. She was a wonderful woman who I got along really well with. And our GM and our program director, they transferred to one of our other markets. So she promoted me to program director. All of a sudden, I'm the youngest major market top 40 program director in the country.
How old were you?
I was 25 when she promoted me. And all of a sudden, I'm in charge of this whole staff. My morning guy is Dick Purton. And of course, I really wasn't his boss. I couldn't tell him what to do. I would ask, Dick, we're doing this contest. Would you please promote this at the, and he was great. In fact, I was his favorite program director because I never tried to tell him what to do. When you pay your morning guy $1 million a year, he knows more than you do. Don't try to teach him how to do a morning show. And I never did. But
why
anyway,
do you think that why do you think that she promoted you when you were so young?
Well, because, Betty and I got along really well. And I would tell her my ideas. I said, oh, yeah, I think, when she was general sales manager, I said, yeah, I wish we would do this. We could, promote our station better if we would get out in the market and make more appearances. And, I came up with all these ideas and we were just discussing because neither one of us was in control. It was just like, hey, yeah, this would be a great idea, wouldn't it? And so she took a liking to me and she promoted me. In fact, the program director that was there at the time wanted to stay. She didn't like him at all because he did not help her out in the sales department. And so she said, nope, you're out. And I went by the name Brian Patrick back then. She said, Patrick is in. He's my guy. And all of a sudden, I'm this major market top 40 program director. I'm interviewed in radio and records magazines, hits magazines. They think I know what I'm doing. I fooled them well.
But how did you learn how to do that job on the fly?
You just went. I was young and I was a little cocky. I started to believe that I really knew more than I really did. But it kind of helped in a way because I broke some really big records. People back then, radio made hits. Record companies would beg you to play their records on the radio, and that's where payola came in, where they were paying off program directors to play songs, which is illegal. And so I had a really good ear for music. That was my one strength. I had a great ear for music. And there was, I'll tell you this story. My one claim to fame, Freddie DeMann was the manager of Billy Idol, Michael Jackson, Madonna, Lionel Richie, all the big artists back then. And his assistant, Michael, I knew, who would call me on records every once in a while. And in Detroit, this big club record from Billy Idol, the song called Moni Moni, was not a hit. It was not a hit. This was 1987. And I said, man, this is the biggest club record in Detroit. I guarantee you, if you guys re-release this song, it will be #1.
Wow.
And so
wait, so it was popular in the clubs, like the dance clubs?
Yeah, it was not a hit at the time. And so,
but in the dance clubs, it was a hit.
Oh, it was huge. It was.
I love, Detroit dance.
Oh, it was
they
great.
know what they were doing. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. We had some great club DJs back then. But anyway, so Freddie told Michael to ask me, "Are you going to add it out of the box?" That meant the first week it's out, you're putting it on the radio. You're reporting it to Radio and Records that you're playing it. And I said, well, of course, this is my idea. Of course, I'll play it out of the box. 10 weeks later, that song was #1 in the country. And Billy Idol, by the way, my oldest son, who's a big Hollywood hotshot now, working in the movie business, but he was only 2 weeks old. Billy Idol sent a platinum album as a thank you to Jared Christopher Peck, my son, in support of bringing that song back. And it was #1 in the country.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't all me. There were many program directors that agreed to re-release it. And it was huge right out of the box and became a big hit. So
actually, one time Billy Idol came to Odyssey, where you and I work, and he did his new song. And I was just in the hallway Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that guy is amazing.
Yeah. And doesn't he still look great?
He
He's in
looks
great shape.
incredible. And
Yeah.
his stage presence is a tiny stage. And I just stood there in the hallway. And then, of course,
Yeah.
there was some guy who was somebody who worked for him who was blocking my view because he probably thought I was a creep, whatever. But yeah, that was really inspiring. I need to find that song, but it's his brand.
Yeah.
I
And
think he released it this year.
I'm blanking on the name of that song, but I know which one you're talking about. It
So
was so
good.
good.
What a great.
Our station XRT was playing it, and probably
Okay.
still do. It was yeah,
But it wasn't like him in his persona on a huge stage. It was him like stripped down. And I thought this
yeah,
guy is
very
amazing.
acoustic. Yeah, it was
Oh my
it was very
gosh.
cool.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
lot of respect for him after seeing him like that. I liked him
Yeah.
before though. I liked him back in the 80s too.
Oh, of course. Of
But can I
course.
ask you what your son does in Hollywood? That's very hard.
Oh
business.
yeah, Jared Peck and I he is a digital artist. He's a colorist. He's the last guy that works on the movies.
Nice.
So, and he's done the last, I want to say 6 or 7 Marvel movies that came out. And whether I want to see them or not, I always go to the theater and I wait till the end, and I have to wait because the credits go forever and he's way down there. But I'll snap a picture of his name in the credits and then post it on Facebook. But he works on all the movies. He's the last guy because he has to, when you shoot a movie, the color is not right and you have to have a digital artist go in and make sure everything is perfect and you have the right sparkles and everything. He could explain it better than me, but he works in Santa Monica and they have this huge huge theaters, and he sits at a desk in an actual movie theater with these lounge chairs, and he works on the movie on the big screen. And so all the directors and the actors usually from the movie will go there and to watch the film, so they don't have to go to theaters or whatever.
Right.
And even he worked on the Star Wars where Han Solo got killed by his son. Oh, I hope I didn't spoil that for anyone. But Harrison Ford came in and he asked Jared, says, Jared, would you, cue that up for me? And Jared said, oh, yes, sir, Mr. Ford, I'll put it on. And then he set it up. He says, I'll be right down the hall if you need anything. And so Harrison said, no, sit next to me and watch it with me. Wow. So I can ask you questions about, certain shots. And so he got to sit with Harrison Ford and watch the whole movie. And he said he was so just regular guy, just so nice. And it's cool. And he gets to work with people like that. George Lucas. He did some stuff for Tom Cruise for the Maverick movie. He actually only did if you've seen the movie, Tom Cruise does an intro to the movie, kind of thanking the audience for coming out to the theaters. And Jared just did that little thing for him. But directors, like for one of the other Star Wars projects, they flew him out to London to work with some other digital artists because it was 2 weeks to the release, and they are under extreme pressure to get these done. So they sent Jared out there to help the other digital artists. But yeah, he flies all over and gets to do these cool things and works with all the big directors. So yeah, I'm obviously very proud of him. And I go to all his movies and I'll just snap his credits at the end there so I can post.
No, that's a real art, because I know even for graphic art, they do the same thing for fine art when they reproduce fine art. But to do that for a movie, you have to be a master artist.
Yeah.
Like seriously know your stuff deeply.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm surprised that they don't outsource that, because I heard that there's a lot of production in Hollywood that's outsourced to Korea and so forth.
Well, I mean, his company, that's Color by Deluxe and Company 3, I think they merged. You'll see in the credits, Color by Deluxe at the end of the movie. But yeah, that's where, all the directors go. So it is, I guess it is outsourced, right? I mean.
Well, no, I mean outsourced to another country, because it used to be.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I mean, outsource also means, like there are two kinds of outsourcing. One is the company that has the product is giving it to another company, a contract company. Then there's the outsourcing abroad, offshoring, I should say. Okay.
I got you.
Okay, now, so let me ask you, do you think your son would want to do a podcast? Because I'm totally into this kind of stuff. Or is he shy?
He is shy, but he would probably do it. Yeah. He would probably, I'll ask him. I'm sure he would. He's so, because I'll, Dad, they'll be friends. There are friends I'll have that whose son wants to get into the business, or daughter, and they're out in Hollywood. Oh, would Jared speak to them? And every time I have called him, that he is always, and he'll give them tours through that whole
That's cool.
building. That's, it's amazing. And then, of course, you've got famous people going in and out of there, but he'll always, sit down and talk to people. So, yeah, I'm sure he would do this.
Well, I am going to LA. You said he lives in LA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm going to LA.
I'm
going to LA.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to LA in January. So when we're
good
offline,
time to go.
okay.
Good time to go.
Yeah.
The fires are down. The
Exactly.
temperature is up. It's good. Yeah.
Although it does rain, because one time I went to LA in January and it was raining the whole time, but it's better than what we get here. So yeah. But okay, I should look him up. I'll get his information.
Yes.
Okay. But that's really incredible. I'd love to know his journey, because it is so hard to get work in Hollywood.
Yes.
And what he's doing is like a master artist in, the 19th century. Like,
yeah.
royalty used to hire those people.
He went to school here at Columbia, and that again, it's just somebody that and it was one of his teachers who took a liking to him, and he did commercials for her here, helped camera work and producing, and her brother was the owner of Company 3 at the time. And she set up the interview with Jared out there, and he became an assistant colorist right off the bat, which, he jumped way ahead in years of how that usually works out. And then eventually became, was promoted to digital artist or colorist, however you want to say it. I see in the credits always says digital artist.
Right.
So.
Well, sorry, yeah, it's like graphic artist, because it used to not be graphic because it was on paper. But okay, so I just see some theme coming up here. Do you think that the key is to get along with people to make it in the media and Hollywood and so forth?
Absolutely. This is career 101 advice here. Never burn bridges. And especially in our business, it's so small now because of, so few companies now that own all the properties. You don't want to burn any bridges, because that'll come back to haunt you. And I've known a lot of people who don't take that advice in this business, but I'll get along with anybody. I have worked with some real doozies of bosses and stuff, and some great bosses too, here in Chicago especially. I've enjoyed all of my program directors and general managers. It's just been a joy here. But you never want to burn bridges. Our I guess market manager or market program director here, Greg, he and I have worked together for over 20 years. So good thing I didn't burn that bridge. He oversees all of our radio stations.
Right. And it's like, I was just telling somebody, I was telling somebody yesterday, I said, I heard about him, but I didn't know what he looked like or something, anything. I didn't really know. I never talked to the guy or anything. And I saw him walk down the hall, and I said, who is that? And they said, that's Greg. And I said, oh, okay. And then I think the first time I actually talked to him at some meeting we had. But anyway, okay, then there's the flip side, because I have seen people who are really not pleasant people, or not fair, or sort of shady, and success. So how does that happen? So what's up with that?
Well, all right. Where do we want to go with this? Do we,
well, because you're very experienced. I'm asking that question because I know there are some really excellent people. Yeah. And then I'm thinking there's some people, everybody's human. I really don't care. But the thing is, when it starts to affect you, go ahead.
Back in the 80s, we had a term for this. And it usually applied. There were a bunch of program directors like me in Top 40 that we were young. We were called the Brat Pack of programming back then. There were about 6 of us. And there were some we would call the upward failure. They'd come into a radio station, destroy it, and then get a better job.
Yeah.
I don't know how. They just built a name for themselves. They made people believe that they really knew what they were doing, but somehow the radio stations they were at failed. And then they'd get a better job. Yeah, I don't know how that happens. And as well, I as a spiritual person, a religious person, I know that catches up eventually, but
Or does it? Because there are a lot of despots and
oh,
they
it
lived a long,
will
healthy life.
one
And
day.
then,
Yes, but what happens after?
right, that's true.
Let's
That's what probably, yeah, that's what Psalms
uh,
about. Yeah.
this is a short journey here on earth. It's afterwards we need to work for, but
Yeah, but then there's a thief on the
that's a
cross.
whole nother
Yeah, but then
subject.
there's the thief on the cross, see? Because it wasn't like he lived an upright life.
What's that?
The thief on the cross, he didn't live an upright life, and he was on the cross, and he was about to die.
What I'm sorry,
The
I
thief,
missed
the
it.
thief on the cross, when Jesus was on the cross, and then there were two people
The
around him.
thieves, the
The thief.
thieves. I'm sorry. I
Well, I'm talking
did.
about the one thief, because the one thief taunted him, and the other thief said, "Remember me." So that's my
Yeah.
point, is that
Well, yeah, and that's yeah. So the one thief was screaming at Jesus, "Come on, you're the Christ.
right,
Save us." And then the other was saying, "No, no, no, stop. He doesn't belong here. He's not like us." And then he begs the Lord, "Lord, would you please remember me?"
right,
He says, "I will see you in my kingdom." And so that's his forgiving of that thief, while the other was purely just save me, all about me,
right.
and why don't you do this, but
But that's what
yeah,
I'm saying, is that people don't always reap what they sow here. Like, they could be the worst person, but then they could, yeah, it's not always eternal retribution or damnation, or, you know what I mean? There's things that happen,
right.
but this is like getting into religion. And the reason why we're talking about religion is because you're an extremely successful podcaster
I
in
wouldn't
the
say
Catholic world.
extremely
Yes, you are. No,
successful.
because your numbers are incredible.
They're
Um,
okay. I hit 16,000 this month, or
well, that's a
last month.
lot. That's a lot in podcasting. People are lucky
And
if they have 200. So,
let me see our total number. See, but I've been doing it for 2 years, and
but
I'm
that's not long.
looking up our numbers total. And I just started a new one too, and that's not doing as well yet, but it's brand new. But total so far, let's see here. Well, there, th-
I
well,
can't see. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow.
300 and some thousand
That's a lot. No, that's really good. Do you
total,
understand they're like 2 billion?
334,000. Yeah.
Okay, but that there are like a billion podcasts, and it's very
Yeah.
hard to get those numbers. So,
Yes. I am in the top 10% in the world.
yeah,
I
see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but like you said, there's millions. So what am I in the top 10%? Like the top
No, but no, but I don't
100,000?
think you understand, because I've been podcasting for many years. It's very hard to get those numbers unless you really have a niche that you own, or
Right.
you do salacious stuff, or you have a corporation backing you. It's very hard to get those numbers.
Yeah. Well, see, but I have help uh, because there are 1.5 million or 1.5 billion Catholics worldwide. So I have a bit of a range to throw a net out to grab a few. So I get help with that. And plus mine's every day. Remember, I release an episode every single day. So that helps build your numbers as well. So
And how long is each episode?
they're about 22, 24 minutes, anywhere between 21, 25 tops. The new podcast is even shorter. Um, that one goes about 17 minutes. But and I'm working on a third one. I'm biting off way more than I can chew. And the third one will be much longer because that's Miracle Mysteries. That'll be miracles throughout the Catholic Church worldwide. There are thousands. So I have a lot to choose from, and fascinating stories that will be fun to do. And those will probably be about an hour, but not every day. Shooting for every other week on that one. It's bigger production.
Okay, but first of all, what is your podcast called? Your insanely popular
Okay,
podcast.
so my first one is the Catholic Word, and that's a rosary podcast, which is every single day. It has become popular because those of us who love to pray the rosary, there's a whole, I mean, there are groups there. Uh, that's a big thing. So with us as Catholics. So that was pretty easy to build that one. The second one I have now is the Catholic word divine with the Divine Mercy Chaplet prayer, but also with excerpts from Saint Faustina's diary. Okay, for those who aren't Catholic, Saint Faustina, long story short, was a nun who had visions of Jesus, and the famous Divine Mercy painting of Jesus with the rays coming out of his chest. They're red and white, representing blood and water. That came from Saint Faustina. She wrote a diary about it, and Jesus spoke to her and gave her all these sayings. So we take an excerpt of that diary and kind of meditate on that, and then we do the prayer. But anyway, that's how that works.
Well, have you always been religious in the radio business while you're working?
No. I was such a heathen. I've only been a Catholic since, let's see, Pope Benedict was, I was married before, and I had to go through a marriage dissolution because, long story short, I couldn't get a annulment. So the Pope had to give me, little old me, a marriage dissolution for me to get into the Catholic Church. So Pope Benedict was Pope at the time, and it took a year and a half. So by the time I got approved, it was Pope Francis who signed off on my dissolution. So I've only been Catholic since Pope Francis became Pope.
Wait, aren't the popes really busy? Like, why are they dealing with individual marriage issues?
Yeah, well, they do. I mean, it's not like they go through, their assistants will probably, I'm sure, went through all these different applications, and then they say, okay, this guy's good. And so the Pope puts his stamp and signs it, and you're good to go. Now I teach RCIA. Again, for Catholics, non-Catholics, that is the rite of initiation of Christians for adults, right? Rite of initiation for Christian adults. Yeah.
Well, it's basically if people want to become Catholic and they're adult, they go through these classes.
Yeah, you have to take the classes. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering now, if you were working in radio back when it was fun and you believe what you do now, how would you perceive it?
Perceive it or perceive me?
Perceive radio, the business back when it was fun, payola, all these kinds of things. I mean, back then when you said it was all fun.
It was wicked. And even though I was the clean program director who didn't accept payola because I didn't, and I was offered a lot. Money.
Can you just say what you were offered? Yeah, tell us what you were offered.
Yeah, I'll break it down for you. In fact, we had to fire one of our receptionists because it was so big business. Every one of my ads, my music, when I would add a new song each week, they were worth to the record company $1,500, to the promoters who were trying to get stations to play it. So if one of those independents would get me to play the record, they would get $1,500 for that one song. So what the independents would do, they would come to me and say, tell you what, we'll split. It's $1,500 an ad. You're doing about 3 a week. So we'll just send you cash and a birthday card. No one's the wiser. And of course, I didn't. They'd offer you drugs.
What made you, sorry, before you tell us everything else you're offered, what made you deny it? Well,
even though I wasn't Catholic, I was still religious, but
you were ethical.
I loved the business. I didn't want to pollute the business. I didn't need that. I made enough. I wasn't rich, but I made enough, and I loved doing what I did. I didn't want to be paid for playing records and especially records I didn't want to play. And so I didn't do it. But one of our receptionists was getting paid off. She was getting paid, and she would get my list of songs I was about to, because I would give her, these are the songs we're adding, call it into the record companies. And so they would be reported. Well, if the independents reported them before, they would get credit. Oh, I got them to play this.
Wow.
So they would get paid. And, 3 records, that's $4,500 for that week. And so my receptionist was getting paid off to call the independent, one of the local guys, And so we had to let her go. And because these independents would come in and they would wait in the parking lot and say, hey, if you'll give me those lists, I will pay you this in cash.
Wow.
And it was, it was nasty. It was a dirty business. A lot of drugs, a lot of
Yeah. What else did they offer you in payolas? They offered you money.
women.
Okay. So they would say, we'll hook you up with this person.
Very expensive prostitutes.
Oh, prostitutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was dirty. It was dirty. And I never
then you
did.
said,
I can tell you honestly.
right.
And understand I'm a hypochondriac. I such a germaphobe. I would never. Oh my God, that would terrify me. But there was. I remember being out in LA, and we were producing new jingles, and I was at this jingle company. But at my hotel, I was staying right on the Universal Studios property, and one of the record reps sent 2 very expensive prostitutes to my room, and did not let them in. And just as hey, just so down the road. But it was nasty. Oh, that was an ugly business, but fun.
Right.
It didn't get involved in that, and I didn't, so it was fun.
But when the prostitutes came,
issues.
but when the people came to your hotel, did you get a phone call saying there are 2 people here to see you, or were they sent up, or
came to the hotel door?
Okay.
To the door, and oh my gosh, I think I broke out in hives. I was so terrified. I didn't know what to do. I even called my wife at the time and told her what happened. But anyway.
And then you said also drugs. They offered you drugs.
Oh, sure. Cocaine was big back then. So you're always offered that. And also, you always went out to dinner and lunch with these guys, which was legal. You could go out to lunch and they could buy you lunch and dinner, and that was fine. But I had like my general manager, she told me, she says, well, you have a budget to take people out for lunch as the program director. I said, well, Betty, I don't have to use it because everybody's taking me out. She says, well, just take your wife out and kids and write down a record rep's name so we can keep that budget, because I don't want you to lose that budget.
Wow.
So I did do that because my boss told me to.
Right.
Yeah, it was dirty and fun. That sounds horrible. It was
I know it was like free.
But there was a fun side.
I know you're saying it was free. It was like this open environment. And as long if you didn't go down that way, you could just experience the fun of it.
I have great pictures with artists that I got to hang out with. Let's see if I can grab, like when I was in Detroit, Bob Seger, his manager, Punch Andrews, and Bob lived 3 miles down the road from me in Detroit, in a much better neighborhood than mine. But they would come by every holiday season. They would give my entire staff fresh fruit for Christmas, boxes of it, and they would personally bring it to drop it off. And every show, I remember in Detroit with Bob Seger, Punch would set me and my entire staff up with front row tickets to every show. Wow. And I was at Pine Knob, this venue outside of Detroit, and Bob Seger had like 50 people backstage outside under this tent. And he and I were just hanging out backstage, and he's like, Brian, I gotta go do pictures and autographs. I'll be back in 10 minutes. And then he spent the next 2 hours with me, just drinking beers. And I'm trying to find that picture right now, because we were just hanging out, having fun. And he was just the nicest guy. And I got to hang out with so many artists like that. It was such a thrill to go out to dinner with them. Whitney Houston. Oh, here's me and Bob from that night. This is
well, if you have the Zoom app on your phone, yeah. Maybe it's sort of bleached out, but if you have the Zoom app on your phone, you can share your screen. But
okay, how do I do that?
Well, do you have the Zoom app on your phone that you're holding?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll
Okay.
set next time. Yeah. So I sort of learned. Yeah. If you want to share, usually what you do is if you have the Zoom app on your phone, then you can click share screen and then you can show everybody what you're
Yeah,
talking.
me and Gloria Estefan.
Wow.
There we go.
Wow.
There's me and Gloria when we're hanging out, and she came and
Or
picked me up.
you can send it to me and then I can share the screen and show people.
And there, yeah. Okay. Me and Sting, and I got my wife the job there for the to be the photographer for Sting's show. I had see back then you had Paul as
Yeah.
a program director, so I'm texting you stuff here. Oh,
But see, also another thing is wait, did these recording artists, they know about all the payola going on?
oh, well, I would
The
think
recording
so.
artists. I'm just wondering if they knew about the
I
business.
would think so, because sometimes they were involved.
Okay.
He brought who was the record rep?
Should you name names? I don't
Tiffany.
know.
Do you remember Tiffany, the artist
Yes,
Tiffany?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, she came by to sing in my office.
Right.
So I mean, but that was nothing to do with payola.
Right.
Um,
Well, because I remember I
sorry.
read Belinda Carlisle from the Go-Go's. I read her memoir, and she was saying that, I mean, of course, she was just doing her thing, but she was saying that there were certain obligations of the recording artists with the radio stations, and they had to make certain amount of appearances, and
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
and they pushed out their. But it was sort of like part of the deal. It was sort of like, this is how the business works. And then she said years later, the business is a little different. But I have a question. If there was so much payola, I got your text. If there was so much payola, then why? I thought that guy was busted in the 60s, Alan something.
Oh, one of.
No, but I thought he was busted,
dozens.
and then they blew it up and they're like, okay, this is it. That's, and then.
Oh no. It was rampant in the 80s.
So it's like they busted that guy and then it just never stopped.
No, there were many many connected to the mob. I won't name any names.
Right, of course not.
There was one guy. There was a label, and it was named for their name. It was named for their family name.
Right.
That's all I'll say. But the younger brother called me when I took over as program director in Detroit, and he was just really badgering me about adding a record. And then he finally said, well, Brian, that's what I heard about you. Your reputation is you don't do. I said, my reputation? I've been here 2 weeks, and I started yelling at him. I said, I have no reputation. I'm only 2 weeks old in this business.
Right.
And so the president, the big guy, who's very powerful, he called me up and he apologized, then made his younger brother apologize to me and stuff. And they were very mob connected. And I didn't know that at the time. I wouldn't have screamed at him like that.
Right.
But nothing happened to me. Obviously, I'm still here. But they treated me with respect, and it was a weird time.
But you're saying that this payola, it was going on throughout the country?
Oh yeah. Oh, rampant.
See, people don't talk about that because they talk about, gosh, who is the guy who's busted? You know what I'm talking about? That very popular DJ in New York. I'm going to look him up.
Yeah, but see, and that's the thing. Nobody got busted on the radio side except for him.
Alan Freed.
Oh yeah, but that
was in the 50s, late 50s.
That nobody in the 80s. When I know guys, I still know them, that nothing ever happened to them. They were investigated by the FBI.
Okay.
And they were very careful how they accepted stuff, and nothing ever happened to them. And I have no proof either.
Right, of course.
So that's only speculation.
No, but there are people who, there's that guy, Fred Jacobs. He's got this really good media site. And,
Fred. Yeah.
And he has this thing. He said, tell us your secrets. And so some people talked about that. They said, I knew this guy. He had cars. He had houses. He had this. He had that. I'm going to share the screen with one picture you sent me so far. What is this? Do you see my screen?
Oh, okay. So that's Sting. Jeff Jennings is on my other side there. He was I went to afternoons. I think I hired him for middays, and he was my music director at the time. Sting is there. This is backstage, and I'm sorry. Kate. I cut out my first wife. She's next to Sting there, but this is backstage at one of his shows back
And
in
this is
Detroit.
you? Wow.
Yeah, with the hair helmet there, you could probably break a 2x4 over my head and not even touch me. And you would probably cut your hand if you touched that hair. But yes, and me with a Budweiser in my hand back when I could drink beer.
So this is really, what year is this?
That has got to be 1986.
Okay, wow. Yeah, the police were huge.
That is by the way, John Cougar Mellencamp tour jacket that his manager gave me when he was in town. It was and look at the collar up, man. Oh yeah, that was the look back in the 80s.
Sting looks so young. And then there's this I'm taking this from
hair. What's that?
I'm taking this from my by the way, if anybody wants to text me, it's 716-202-8255.
Look at that hair. Look at my hair. Oh my goodness. And I'm such a kid there. And Gloria.
What year is this? Yeah.
This was this is backstage. I know that room. One of the backstage areas at Pine Knob she was playing. And this was before the show. Yeah, she doesn't look sweaty and neither do I. So that was before the show. And we went backstage and just hung out for a little while and then went to see the concert. But yeah, look at Gloria's hair.
I know.
That was the 80s too back then.
Right. And what year was that?
That would have been 87. Okay. And then
whoops, sorry. And you sent me a third picture?
Yeah, didn't I send the other one, the Bob Seger one?
Yeah, let's see. Hold on. Ooh, here we go.
Oh, this is Heart. This is Heart. Look at that's my my Bruce Springsteen jacket with collar up again. But this is the band Heart. And kind of a weird look there with Nancy bent over in front of me and then Ann's next to me there.
Wow.
And look at Nancy and Ann's hair there. And they sent me this picture, by the way. We had a professional photographer there, and this is before the show, obviously, because they're not all sweaty and so forth after the show. But this was before the show, and they took the picture, and then Nancy, one of them had it framed, and they had this matting around it, and all of them signed it for me and sent that to me. So yeah, that was 1987, definitely, because I remember getting that jacket from the Bruce Springsteen people. But yeah, Ann Wilson and Nancy and the rest of the group there. That was a fun time. And me and my big hair.
Right. Now, so what were those people like when you met them?
Oh, so wonderful. Wow. So it was a rare time that I ever came across really jerks in the business as far as artists go. I'm sure there were a few. No one's coming to mind. I'm trying to think. Oh, Whitney Houston was so sweet. We were the first top 40 station to play her. And
she's a great singer.
That was 1985, I think. 1985 that she broke into top 40 because the urban stations were already playing her. She wasn't a big artist. And then we started playing her and she came in for an interview. Wow. This was before she was Whitney.
Right.
She came in with these ripped up jeans, a little white t-shirt and yellow sunglasses. And she comes and I was hosting the afternoon show. And she came in for me to interview. And I'm like, oh, well, your mother was a gospel singer. And she one of the backup singers to Elvis. That must have been wonderful.
Wow.
Yes.
Also, she was very meek.
Well, yeah. Well, so, growing up with gospel music, that probably had a big influence on your first album. Tell us about that. Yes.
Whoa.
It was the worst interview I ever gave.
Oh, this is on the air?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was all live,
Wow.
and, but she was so sweet and And then the next year she exploded, she was a big star. And I went backstage. I can't remember which venue. I think it was Cobo Hall in Detroit. We went backstage with some winners, and Whitney comes up, Brian, hey, like this big star, the hair's all done, all dressed up, and she's a superstar now and big personality, totally different. But it was interesting to see the growth there. And what a talent.
Yeah, incredible.
What a voice.
Yeah, what a voice. But it's interesting that nobody really prepped her for public speaking or speaking on the radio or anything.
No, and you didn't back then. I mean, you just, you bring the artist in. It's like, you got to go to the radio stations. You got to go to this one. They broke you into top 40. You got to go see them. And, I mean, she just wasn't ready for it then. But, obviously, superstar, and then did movies and everything. She's just awesome. But so nice to see artists like that before they become big. And I don't know if you remember, and probably not many people do, Corey Hart was an 80s artist who did Sunglasses at Night.
Yeah, I remember that song. Yeah.
So Corey is from Montreal, and he had this old beat up Mazda. And when that song came out, he drove down from Montreal to Detroit to do the interview with me. And I took a picture with him and my midday guy at the time, who's a big network news guy now, Doug Dunbar. He's out of ABC in Dallas. But we took this picture, and I'm talking to Corey. I said, so what did you fly in this morning? Well, no, I drove down. And then we went out to his car. It's this old beat up Mazda. It's like, Corey, man, you got money now. Why are you driving? He says, I don't want to waste my money on that.
Ooh,
it was very smart.
Wise. Because maybe he was sort of a one-hit wonder, because I remember that song, but I don't remember other.
And then what was it? Never Surrender. Remember, it was from a movie too. And I mean, he didn't, but he got to tour, and he's still a good Canadian artist, probably. I don't know. But he was smart with his money. That was cool to see him come down and do that. That he was so regular guy,
Right.
Lionel Richie also very.
Oh, you met him?
Oh yeah, Lionel's the nicest artist out there. Just like you've seen him on American Idol, exactly like that. It's not a fake persona that he does for TV. He's just like that when he comes in. He's just so sweet and kind, and to every single person, and makes sure he takes pictures and talks to everybody. Just so incredibly sweet.
I wonder why some people like that, he's Blockbuster, he was global. They're so gracious, and then other people are not. Like, I wonder if he learned some lesson early on, because what I've learned is you have to treat everybody well, because you just never know. Well, first of all, you should treat people well anyway.
Right.
But especially in the business, you never know what's going to happen.
That
so
is
just
so
remember,
true. Yeah. Isn't it true? And there were times, I'm sure I was a jerk to people, especially back then when I was cocky and young.
Well, you had power.
I tried to be nice.
You had power, but you also had power.
Yeah, and it gets to your head. And you're doing interviews every week, or every other week at least, with a trade magazine in the business. And you start believing that press, and you, oh, wow, I really must know what I'm doing.
Wow.
No, I didn't, but it worked still somehow. I did have my strength there were two strengths. I had a great ear, and still do, for music, I think. And I knew how to develop talent on the radio. I always worked with our disc jockeys and critiqued them, and, built them up. There was one guy I remember just in a station in North Carolina when I was programming in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. And this guy, he was a part-timer, and the program director before me told me, yeah, he's a waiter. I've kept him on. You're going to need to let him go. He sucks. He's horrible. And so I sat down with this kid, and I was like, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep doing this? He said, yeah, I really do. I really do. And so I worked with him every day. And then I put him on overnights, and then he just got better and better. Now he's like a big DJ down there in North Carolina. But, my strength was I would take time to develop people, and give them a chance. I have helped a lot of people, and even people here in Chicago will tell you, Lisa Costi, my sweet dear friend, will always credit me with her job over at She
Nice.
100.
See, I should interview her too. I should interview her too.
Yes, you should. Lisa Costi is wonderful, just a sweetheart, and good friends with our Lisa at BBM, of course, in the
Yeah.
afternoon.
But how do you, what advice do you have for people who do want to do well? Like, what kind of advice did you give these people who, you know, maybe weren't that great? Or is it that they weren't really good, or you saw something in them and then you developed them?
Yeah, it's seeing that spark in their eyes, that little sparkle. I was telling you just the other day, a couple of days ago when we were talking about doing this, Hannah B, who's working in one of the suburb stations here. What an incredible talent. What a great, uh, enthusiastic,
And I should
energetic
also interview her.
person. What's
And
that?
I should also interview her.
Oh, you should definitely interview her. And she has a wonderful, sweet little podcast too, Hannah B. Um, she's got such a great attitude. She's grateful for every opportunity. She's so eager to learn and absolutely loves the business, which is so rare for
Yeah.
people her age. She's probably 24 now, but gosh, what a, when you see someone like that, you want to do everything you can to
Mhm.
help them develop. And I don't care what kind of talent they have. Everybody who, if you have that kind of talent or that kind of passion
Mhm.
to do something, you will be good at it eventually if you
Well,
stay
but
with it.
it's also, you know, meeting good people like you, because there are people who do have passion, but there are people who don't think they're, you know, too intense, or they maybe favor somebody else just because, or
Yeah,
so you really
yeah,
need good people to acknowledge that.
yeah, you do. You do. And there aren't enough of those people in our business. And I think that's another problem
Well, is that a
this.
general thing? Like, has it always been like that? There aren't enough people, or there were
Well,
more
I'm
people
saying
back
there
then?
aren't enough people encouraging young people for our business. And
But was it
but
like, but did they encourage before? Like before, when the business had a ton of more people, was there more
yeah,
encouragement?
yeah, oh yeah, and everybody wanted to be in this business back then. One of our employees at Odyssey, the marketing director for XRT, our station, our sister station, Paul Weber, he'll always we're dear friends, but he always teases me. Evidently, when I was Brian Patrick back in the 80s at Z95.5 in Detroit, he would call every week, evidently, to try to get a job from me or
Oh.
to interview with me. And evidently, I didn't return his calls. I don't remember. But back then, when I had an opening, you would literally get 200 cassettes,
Mhm.
yeah, tapes, cassettes of air checks of disc jockeys all over the country.
Wait, sorry, I can't hear you. This is a problem with people using their phones. The last person I interviewed was breaking in and out. Ooh, I think you're going off. Yeah. Now I see. Yeah, your phone is breaking up. I wish people would just
Well,
use a computer. Oh, now I hear
I
you.
am using the computer.
Oh, okay. I hear you now. I hear you now. Okay.
Oh, it's my internet that I see that's not stable. Am I
Okay. I
not
hear
on
you
the right?
now. I hear you now. So go
Okay.
ahead with what you're saying.
Yeah, you are on my computer. I'm just
I'm sorry.
was
Okay.
having internet problems there. Um, but anyway, I was saying that
He called every week and you don't remember. You said you used to get 200 cassettes.
yeah, 200 people wanted so badly to get into our radio station. It was a good station. We had
Yeah.
Dick Burton, and we were known all over the country. So I just don't remember him because I would go through cassettes and, if you didn't hear it, and back then when you'd listen to an air check, you'd listen to the first break. If they didn't grab you,
Yeah.
next.
What were you looking for? How did you know what a good air check
Just,
was?
it's just a sound. It was just a sound. And it depends. And everybody's so subjective.
Mm.
I would just listen for that right voice I wanted to hear, that right personality, that right, grab me from the first break, someone compelling. The biggest challenge that you would have as a top 40 jock or a pop jock today, the biggest challenge is squeezing in as much personality and being relevant in
Yeah.
a 15 to 20 second intro.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. And that was an art, especially back then, that you were relevant. Every break meant something. What I would always tell my jocks, and many people do today, if you don't have something relevant to say, I'd rather you just segue the song and play a jingle in between to promote the station. I don't want to hear you just say the call letters. Give me something relevant every single break you do. Make it mean something. Even if it's just like it's fall and the time of year, fall. And, one time, one of my old bosses, BJ, Barry James, who programmed us at Hubbard in Bonneville. He's a good program director. He was tough, but he was good. And this one break we heard this guy do, he was just a quick little break. Oh, I stepped outside. You could hear the crunch of the leaves under my feet. And it was just a beautiful, crisp day, and it was just a quick little break, but it's like he painted this great picture for us.
That's good writing right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just a quick little break he did. And that's what, we wanted our
Nice.
personalities to think before you go on. Don't just babble, make it mean something. But anyway.
Wow, that's great. That's great advice. Also, that's true because I interviewed somebody a while ago. I forgot who it was, but they said it's sort of like Twitter. You have to be compelling in just a few words.
Exactly. And especially now, that's what it is. You are tweeting a message. Make it count. Do you tweet and just say, hi, everybody? No. Yeah. Hey, I'm going to Superdog, or look at this, they have to mean something, right?
Yeah.
It's well, then thing on the radio.
What kind of advice did you get? Because obviously, you went from Virginia, you went to Detroit, major market, and you worked at WLS-FM. Actually, a long time ago, I did interview Greg Brown.
Oh, Greg Brown. Yeah.
Such a nice guy.
Oh, one of the nicest ever.
I know.
Always.
Oh my gosh. I could talk to him for a long time. It's for my podcast some years ago. And I thought
there was the sweetest man. Yes.
I thought, wow, this station must be very special because they're employing somebody like this, who's such a nice person, such a great voice, talent.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
WLS has had some incredible talent go through that radio station through the years. Yeah. They've gotten some of the best.
Yeah.
Some of the best. When I was first there, when I was doing nights there a couple years back.
Wait, when did you go there? When did you go to LSF?
Oh gosh, that was 5 years ago. Bouncing around places here in Chicago. I mean, I've been in Chicago since 1992. I was at Q101 when it was New Rock Alternative, when they first kicked it off.
Wait, are you talking about the 90s? You were one of those original people?
Yeah.
Oh, because I remember I was living in Asia and I came back and I was really into alternative. And my brother said,
wasn't that a great station back then?
It was good, but I was such a snob that I would say, oh, they're not going deep. They're playing the obvious hits, whatever. And I was such a snob, everybody. But my brother was saying, yeah, there's a station and they're playing this music. And it was mind blowing back then.
Oh, yeah. In fact, do you know who Mark Goodman is from the MTV days?
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. One of the curly hair guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, I just saw him recently in Nashville, but Mark and I did a morning show together there.
Wait, I should interview him for this.
Oh, you should.
You're naming all these people. I got to get a list.
Mark Goodman has got great stories, obviously. He's a great jock. He's a great talent. He's on Sirius. He has 2 different shows on Sirius. Of course, he does the 80s show because that was when he was on MTV. But he's also got a talk show on there as well. He's really good, really nice guy, really just great personality, and you feel that when you talk to him.
Well, basically, when we're off the air, I can get a list from you of people to contact because I just love talking to people who've been in the business for a while and get their stories and stuff.
Yeah, Mark's got great stories. He would have great stories for you.
But anyway, so sorry, what were you saying? So you're talking about LS. You're talking about when you.
Yeah, no, when I first went there, so my studio where it is, we have the studio for the FM is in a great spot. It's in the corner of the NBC Tower. We overlook Chicago River in front of us, and then to the side, Lake Michigan. So it's beautiful. And then next to that studio was the LS, and it still is the WLS-AM studio. And Steve Dahl was still there. And our own, oh gosh, I'm trying to blank on her name, our network news person from Chicago that does on network news on WBBM. She works for CBS though.
Yeah, Jennifer Kuiper.
Kuiper. Oh, thank
I
you.
interviewed her. Yeah, I've interviewed her a couple
Yeah,
times.
yeah. So Jennifer was on
I love her
Steve
voice.
Dahl's show. I love Jennifer Kuiper. She is awesome.
I don't really know her, even though I interviewed her, but
I
her
only
voice
knew
is
her from Steve Dahl's show, and I would go in right before I'd go on the air because Steve was finishing up his show, and I would hang out with them, and he knew who Dick Burton was, and he was a big fan, so we would talk old stories.
because he used to be in Detroit. Steve Dahl was in Detroit. Yeah.
Yeah, he would never trash Dick Burton. I told Steve Dahl that. I said, you know, when you did that whole slam on Howard Stern and all these different DJs, and then you got to Dick Burton's name and you said, no, I could never slam Dick Burton. He's wonderful.
Wow.
And I told him, I said, you know, Dick Burton heard that and he really respected you after that. And he was like, really? Because he was a big fan of Dick Burton too. He says, man, next time you talk to him, tell him I said hello and that I am still a big fan of his. And
wow.
it was cool. Steve Dahl's just, wonderful.
Oh
person.
my gosh. Okay. Yeah, that's because I did listen to him when I was a kid, and
everybody did.
Oh my gosh. That was incredible radio because
Steve Dahl was, I mean, come on, Disco Demolition. The guy is world famous.
But not just that, because I remember listening to that, but it was also that it was so spontaneous and so you didn't know what they were gonna say. And it was irreverent and so entertaining.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Steve Dahl, one of a kind. And Brendan, that's on his show, and they still do the podcast. You know, they still podcast that show. He lived right behind me here in Bucktown. He was on the other side of the back alley here. He just moved to Wrigleyville, but and his whole staff was just so good. And they were fun to watch. I would just sit in the studio and just, you know, like a fly on the wall and listen to them. They were so good.
Mm-hmm. But so when you went to LS, but then where were you before LS-FM?
Okay, so I was where we are now, same floor, 9th floor of Prudential 2 there. I was working at 104.3 WJMK because Greg Salk, our boss now, brought me over, and he will cringe that I'm even bringing it up because he brought me over to work middays. It was a classic hit station. 2 weeks later, they blew up the format and everybody got fired. And he was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea they were going to do this. And he was so apologetic. I was like, Greg, I'm glad you brought me over here. And they ended up keeping me for 6 months because Ed Lover came in from the MTV days doing mornings on the news station, WBMX, the classic urban hits. I don't know what exactly you'd call the format, but that's still around today. And Ed Lover is still on the air there with Jen BT. A great show. And Ed Lover, oh my goodness, talk about stories.
Right, yeah.
Tupac and all the, you know, he knew everyone and does know everyone. And Mike Tyson and he are great pals in the stories I would hear. But that's another great interview, Ed Lover. No, these are all great interviews. I'm supposed to remember, not everybody wants to be interviewed. Okay. Oh,
I tried some people.
But Ed loves telling stories
of
his old days with all the big rappers. He knew them all, interviewed them all, hung with them, fought with them. No, Ed Lover's great. But anyway, they kept me 6 months to get him started on the morning show. So I helped out his producer to get it rolling. Then I went over to WLS after that. So,
but then you said you're also at Bonneville. When, I mean, I'm confused about your.
Okay, so I was at Q101, MS Broadcasting at the time, Q101 when it was new in 92 to 96.
Oh yeah, my question is, what was it like to be a Q101? That was the heyday.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
And I'll keep this clean. I had just divorced. My first wife left me. I was so brokenhearted. I dated a lot. I'll just say it that way. I dated a lot. I was, devastated and I needed to lift my spirits. And Q101 was the coolest
It
radio
was the
station
coolest.
on the planet.
It was
And
like K-Rock. Well, K-Rock, I think, was above it, but it was sort of like the K-Rock of the rest of the country. K-Rock is
yeah,
in LA. That was
yeah,
alternative.
yeah, yeah. I think it was better than K Rock, but K Rock's great. Yeah, I admit. But man, it was awesome. And back then, again, radio was relevant, and people knew me there. They knew me, and it was, clubs I never paid for, didn't pay for drinks, didn't,
Oh,
you hung out and you did appearances at these places. I remember at Lucky's. This was this hip club actually on West Institute and Wells in
oh my gosh,
Chicago.
that's near me. Yeah, I know where
Yeah,
that
it
is.
was kind of hidden though. It was a
Yeah.
very cool club, and Scott Braverman owned it, who I became friends with. Our kids went to the same school here or in Old Town, and so Scott hired me every Friday night to do appearances when I was at Q101, just to hang out and buy women drinks and flirt with them and get on the stage, intro the band, and just be nice with people. And I mean, it was the coolest club.
Mhm.
He would have a line for 2 blocks to get in there, and all the big stars came, the athletes. We had Scottie Pippen. We'd keep a table for all these different athletes that would come in, and they'd shoot pool, and no one would bother them. You didn't, oh, hey, can I have you? It was a cool club. Sandra Bullock, when she was filming While You Were Sleeping, remember that? Did you ever see
Yeah.
that movie?
I know I didn't see it, but I know it
It was
actually.
cute. It's a cute movie, filmed here, and it was her birthday, and she was so sweet and just hanging out. All the celebrities never paid for anything.
Mhm.
And so my job was just to go around, flirt with women, buy them drinks, keep everybody happy, and intro the bands. And they paid me a lot of money to do that every Friday. And it was fun. So yeah, now I've forgotten the original question, but it was just
Well,
so
no, I
much
was asking you
fun.
because I remember that station. No, what was it like? Because that station was
It was
incredible.
great. It was
Yeah.
great
You 101.
to work at Q101 back in their heyday. It had a lot of benefits. It was so cool. I skydived for the first time live on the air on Q101
Wow.
at Skydive Chicago out in Oswego, I think it is. And they put the phone in my pocket on my arm, and they took me up extra high. And I had a tandem jumper with me,
Mhm.
but we jumped out of the plane. And he said, just, let's go up higher. And I'm going to pull soon so you'll have extra time. And I did it live with Steve Fisher, was one of our jocks, great jock on Q101. And we did it live on the air back then. That, you don't do that anymore. And I'm
But I
talking
mean,
about,
yeah, you don't do that, but we now have social media and we have digital and people are doing all
yeah,
kinds of things live. So let's not forget that because see,
yeah.
this is my perspective. I wasn't in the media until 2006, but until the internet came around, I was telling some younger people this. If you
Mhm.
wanted to express yourself as a creative person, you could not express yourself unless you were on stage or unless somebody in the business gave you a break.
Right,
And
right.
now it does not matter. I always say to the students I teach at
Yeah.
Columbia, you guys just put your stuff out there and enjoy it, and you don't know what's going to
And
happen.
that is the great thing about the internet. I
Yeah.
mean, you and I have podcasts. We couldn't get on a
No,
radio station, right? We couldn't own a station.
no.
This is our radio station, right? Our TV
Right.
station, TV, radio, whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. And it's so wide open now. And isn't that wonderful? And,
It's wonderful. Now, of course, you're not going to have like the big bucks. Now, some people do make big
no,
bucks, but
yeah, yeah. Those who know how to work it, sure, they make the big bucks. By the way, not one of them. But
neither. I don't.
mine's a different reason too, that I do my podcast. But
Oh, so your podcast, you don't make any money off it. You don't have a sponsor or
no,
anything.
no, no, no. I don't sell commercials for that. I just didn't want to cheapen it. Now my new podcast, I am doing subscriptions, and that's to pay for it. Because you know how expensive this can get, especially, I do one every day, 2 every day. So it gets pricey with the syndication, Lipson company that I
Well, see,
use.
I
And
don't, yeah, because the thing is, because I started podcasting so early, I did it, I'm DIY, so I don't pay any, all I pay is for
yeah,
my,
you
I
see,
just pay like,
you're a pioneer, Margaret.
well, no, I'm not a pioneer, John Suntress, okay, with a very
John,
popular,
I know John. Yeah. John
John
with
Saunders with a very
Word balloon
yes.
is
He's a
great.
pioneer. I'm second
Yes.
wave. Okay.
No, John. Yeah, John. I still watch his podcast.
Me too. Love it.
Yeah, John is awesome. He was my production director at Bonneville and Hubbard for a while. We would hang out. He would boy, great stories. Did you interview him, by the
Oh
way?
yeah, I've interviewed him. I've interviewed him before, and he's gonna be interviewed again. But he's really, I'm just mentioning him because John Saunders is a pioneer of podcasting. He was working in the radio broadcasting business.
Yes.
And he really was one of these people that saw what was coming, and he went out and he did his own thing, and now he's doing his own thing full time. And he also knows so much about it. But yeah, he's a pioneer. But
yeah.
When I was starting out though, I'm not like you. I didn't have to pay a service. All I do is I pay for my web hosting. I have unlimited bandwidth. We're just getting geeky here, and I syndicate myself. So
wait a minute.
But anyway,
unlimited bandwidth?
Because it's my, I'll discuss with you later. I mean, this is what I tell the students. Well, before I started teaching at Columbia, I did do some workshops at libraries, and I told people how to do it because there weren't really good services. Libsyn is fantastic, but I was telling people, if there's a way to do it yourself. But
boy, I guess I should have talked to you before I did mine, maybe.
Well, the thing is, I was like under the radar, but also no, I do pay. This is why I started Buy Me a Coffee. I put it on my website because I have to pay for Zoom, I have to pay for Restream, and I have to pay for equipment, but whatever. Anyway, okay, so let's go talk about your podcast. How did you get so many listeners? It is very, very hard to get thousands of listeners.
Yeah, but and by the way, I've taken many courses. I've got certificates in everything digital marketing at DePaul University.
Nice.
I just took night classes while I had spare time and did class after class after class on it. So I just grew it through social media and small advertising on Facebook. And
so what kind of social media are you more, what kind of social media do you have the most exposure on that made you so successful?
Probably Facebook for my listeners, for Catholic listeners, and they're usually a little bit older. I mean, well, average age is about 45, I guess. But of my demographics that I see coming in. But it's Facebook was a big thing, and it's not like I've got that many followers on Facebook. I think it's around 17,000.
Wait, that's see, I don't think you understand. For podcasts, that's a huge audience.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, I don't have that many followers because I do.
But again, like I mentioned before, there are 1.5 billion.
Right. Catholics. So because you're being, I don't know if you're being self-deprecating, you don't realize what's going on, but you're very popular.
I mean, I'm grateful. I am grateful. Again, thanks be to God. I'm so grateful.
Which is good because it's a religious podcast.
Yes. And that's my thing. I have to do it right. And there are no cutting corners with that sort of thing,
right.
It's got to be done right. But to your question, I grew it through, and Facebook is probably the biggest growth. And I'll buy an ad. It's not an ad, the boost button.
The boost, yeah.
Yeah, a boost. I'll just boost, but I'll boost wisely.
Right.
I'll pick audience type, demographic, where and mine's basically Canada and America, although I have listeners. I have a wonderful listener in Ireland who I Facebook and we message all the time. But listeners everywhere, Italy, because it is. I mean, it's a Catholic thing, so you get listeners all over the place. But
they also have to understand. They also have to understand English well.
Exactly, and that's the thing. 1.5 billion Catholics worldwide, but the majority do not speak English. So it's just under half that speak English. But that's still a big net to throw out there to get a lot of listeners.
Oh yeah.
But that's why I say I wish I had more, because I have so many potential people out there, and I'm trying to reach more, and it's not obviously to make money on the Catholic word. It's just to get that message out, and that's my commitment to do that As
But are you like are you the only podcast doing this kind of thing?
No, no.
Okay.
Oh, no. And there's a wonderful app, and I'll promote anybody. There's a wonderful app, by the way, Hallow, 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 the Hallow app, that has every prayer on it and big stars on it.
Hmm.
Mark Wahlberg is on it. Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus in The Passion, and a movie star that's done many other movies. What other big stars are on it? The guy who plays Jesus now on The Chosen, which is a big online TV series watched by millions and millions worldwide. So many big stars on that. They're big, and they're based out of Chicago. I've even tried to get jobs there, but they're nothing there. It's a wonderful app, though. Hallow, if you want to, you get every prayer on that. There's, Kevin Matthews. Remember Kevin Matthews?
Right. Yes. Yeah. I know I know he wrote a book.
Yeah, he wrote a book, Broken
yeah.
Mary. And he's very Catholic, and he does he doesn't do a daily rosary podcast, but he does have them pre-recorded, like the 4 versions, the sorrowful, joyful, glorious, and luminous mysteries that we do. Anybody Catholic knows what I'm talking about there, but they're mysteries that we have in the rosary. But he has a version of each one, but I don't think he does any daily stuff.
Well, also he's a pro broadcaster, so he's combining his skills.
Kevin's amazing.
Right.
I don't know him personally, but
right.
I'm a fan. I've always been a fan of Kevin's. Yeah.
But anyway, so in your radio career, though, because it's very interesting, you have such a huge career. When you were doing it and you were meeting different people, did you think my goal is to do da da da? Like, so for instance, you were first on the air and then you became a program director.
Mm-hmm.
So did you think, okay, my goal is to be a general manager, or did you just want to have fun in radio, or what was your goal?
Well, okay. And I wanted to be a big program director, and I was for a little while.
Right.
But then my first marriage broke up, and I didn't stick with it. And even Greg Salk asked me that once, our boss now, because I interviewed for.
Oh, I never see.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed with him for a program director position way back when, and he says, dude, I can't go to our and this wasn't with Odyssey, this was with Hubbard. He says, I can't go to Jenny with you. You haven't programmed for years. Why did you stop? And I told him, I said, well, I went through a divorce, and I was depressed, and I just gave it up, and all I wanted to do was just be a jock, because it was simpler just to be a radio personality on the air, and I didn't want to deal with the headaches anymore. There were a lot of headaches involved with being a program director. And I just want to have fun. At that time, that's what I was thinking. I just wanted to have fun on the radio. It was easy, and I was able to support myself and my kids doing that, especially as an ex-husband, supporting my kids and now my new kids. But
it's interesting because you said you were depressed and stuff, but then you scored one of the best gigs in the entire nation.
Mm-hmm.
So your demo must have been amazing.
No.
What?
No, because the program director at the time, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Oh, I'm so sorry. I see his face in front of me right now. I'm so bad with names.
Well, I mean, I'm bad with names at the moment, because I'll even think about somebody famous and I won't really remember. And then,
But anyway, I went to him, and he says, I will tell you now, you're a top 40 jock. We need laid back rock jocks. You're not what I'm looking for. I'll give you part-time, but you're not going to. And the reason I came here, by the way, I had a deal signed with a New York radio station, actually in Long Island. It was the number 2 station there, to do mornings. And I told my first wife, I said, well, I will pay for you and the kids. It was a good contract. I will pay for you and the kids. I'll get you a house in Long Island, and you guys will live there, so you'll stay close to me, so I can keep seeing the kids, and we can still do the shared custody thing. And last minute, she decides she's coming back home to Chicago. And so I'm like, I can't be away from my kids. And I called the company, and they were so mad at me because I already signed. They could have sued me, but they let me out of it. And I came here with no job. and just BS'd my way into part-time. And he said, well, I'll bring you in part-time, but I'm not going to give you full-time.
But what's interesting though is he gave you part-time even though he didn't like your sound. And actually was the radio station in Long Island, were they top 40?
Yeah, they were top 40.
So how did he give you a part-time job if he didn't like your sound?
He just, out of pity, probably. He gave me a part-time job, and then he liked the way I sounded. And he 6 months later, it wasn't even 6 months, it might have been 6 months. I was back in North Carolina before my first wife was getting ready to move back to Chicago. And so I'm there visiting my kids, and the phone rings, and he says, boy, I never thought I'd be saying this, but yeah, I want you to work noon to 3.
Whoa.
Noon to 3, do an hour of production, making commercials and doing whatnot, and going out on the street, getting recordings for our sound bites and stuff, and got full-time right there.
That's incredible.
And they were great.
That's like a miracle.
Hours. That was great hours. And then became a co-host with Mark Goodman in the morning. Then he fired me from that because he fired Mark when we got back. We were there during 1994 Winter Olympics in Lillehammer. And we broadcast live from there, Mark and I did. And when we came back, we got fired. And he fired Mark, and he says, Brian, I got to fire you because I fired Mark. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you severance, and then I'm going to bring you back for fill-in the same day. So
wait, I don't get why he had to fire you, because
that was
he fired
just his thing. He says, nah, I got to blow it all up. I can't keep you. You know, if I'm starting fresh. And so he did. And then he brought me back to do part-time, and he promised me, he says, I'll make sure you make as much as you did, if not more, than when you were on the morning show. And he did. And for the longest time, from 94 to 96, and then the Mix, 101.9 called me up, and they wanted to hire me. And so I went over there for a lot more money, and it was great. And then we took off. The Mix was in the dumps back then.
And then is it the late 90s?
Yeah, that was 1996. That was 1996, August 1996. August 12th, I was hired, 1996, at the Mix, and I was there for 20 years between the two stations, the Mix and 100.3.
So did they call you because they liked how you sound? I mean, this sounds like your entire career.
See, and that's the funny thing. When I was at Q101, they thought I was too corny, too top 40. But then when the Mix called me, oh, he's a cool jock. We need him over here. And they started their new format in 96, which was the hot AC. They were a boring AC at the time, very wishy-washy. And then Barry James came in, and he did a great job. He brought in Eric and Kathy. You know, all the scandal with that, whatever.
Well, they were very popular for 20 years.
Oh, they were huge.
Yeah.
And BJ, and I remember listening to Eric's cassette air check in the office. And we were listening to air checks, and we were like, yeah. He says, what do you think of this? Yeah, I like this guy. And I knew Kathy Hart. She worked for me in North Carolina.
Whoa.
Yeah. She was my music director and my sidekick on the air. Brian and Kathy in the morning, G105. And we had a morning show down there. Yeah, it's a small world. It's a small world. Yeah. But we built that, and BJ did a great job building that morning show. He, you know, we did the billboards, the TV ads, and they became the biggest morning show here until, you know, whatever happened. There, you know,
but they did sound really good. I mean, Eric sounded, I mean, it wasn't my kind of show, but I appreciated it. I know I appreciate it for what it was. I mean, he
is a great talent. He was good at what he did and is good at what he does. Not to take away anything from him. Right. I mean, I don't know what happened with any of the other stuff, nor could I comment because I just don't know anything. But I can tell you he was a great talent, and so is Kathy and Melissa, who does our mornings on our country station here now for our company Odyssey at US 99.
It's funny because this sounds like a company podcast, but it's really not. This is just my own. But yeah, we all work at the same company. I've never seen her. This is another thing. See, I don't really see some of these people, so I don't know.
Right. Yeah. It's nice for me because I bump into all these people now that I've known for 20 years, and
Right.
we'll be getting in on the elevator. It's like, oh, Melissa, hi, Jen BT, hey,
I
you
don't think
know,
I'd even know if I did see her. So okay, I've got to look
yeah,
to see what she looks like and look around for her. But now another thing is, I have a question. When you were when you did some embarrassing stuff, okay, because we all do stuff that we're embarrassed about.
every day,
No,
every,
okay. Well, no, but okay, but now you're more mature. But what I'm saying is throughout the years when you did all these goofy things,
yeah.
and then you said the world is small, were you ever worried that people would hold it against you?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
because that's sort of why I sort of forgive. Like there are people who I know what they've done, okay?
yeah,
But I meet them in the present, I think, okay, that's the past, this is the present, their present is different. So I just sort of let go of the other stuff, like in
yeah.
my
No,
judgment.
no,
But
yeah, me too.
yeah.
But sure, sure. Man, I joke when I became Catholic, and I even tell people at RCA just to get a laugh because I am goofy. But I said, "Oh man, I came from radio, man. Hey, listen, I had a rough past. And a lot of our saints, Saint Ignatius, Saint Augustine, were all these, man, they were horrible. Saint Paul, I mean, persecuted people. But anyway, I'm sorry, don't want to get too religious. But what I said to them, I said, oh, when I did my first confession, the 80s alone took an hour. It's just, but it's true. I had so many things. That was
So,
tough. That was a tough confession.
but you didn't
Um,
go to church all those years?
No, not married to my first wife. She was
Okay.
not even baptized. That's why I had to get a dissolution. Very technical Catholicism stuff there, but
So all those years
um,
ago, were you not religious growing up or something?
no, I was, but
Okay.
like my mom was Catholic originally, but then she became Episcopalian, and I was confirmed Episcopalian.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I followed through my mom's steps. But then I brought her back to Catholicism right before she died. But yeah, I was religious growing up, and I went and I always searched. By the way, even though I had my rough years, where I was just out having fun.
Mhm.
But I like to say that I was always a nice guy. I was never nasty to people or did horrible things. It's just I was probably a bit too dating too much people. Let me just put
Mhm.
it like
Right, a
that.
lot of
How
people
about
have
that?
done that. Okay, but I have
Yeah.
a question though. But my question is not just a religious sense, but when you said there's a small world, and so you worked with one person in one market, then you saw them in another market. Were you afraid that they would tell things to other people about what you'd done?
Oh, no, I was never like that. I mean,
Okay.
you know, eh, no. Um, and I never burned my bridges either. Um, maybe in Columbus, Ohio with that one
What's
program director, but
what's an example of burning a bridge in the business?
okay. I'll give the one bridge I did burn, which I didn't care, and it didn't mean anything, was in Columbus. And this guy, I thought, how cheap. He demoted me, took me off middays, put me at night, even though I was the number one midday guy in Columbus.
Why do you do that?
Didn't like me. And he was just, he had this power trip. And in
Yeah,
my opinion, I'll just say in my opinion
right.
and everybody else's. But finally, they wanted to get rid of me, I think, because the program director who hired me got fired. So I was associated with him and they knew I was loyal to him. So they wanted me out. So he would assign commercials for me to record that ran that night on my show, knowing that I did production after my show. So he could set me up to fire me for not getting the commercial done. And it was just really
Right.
cheap stuff like that. And finally, I called him into the general manager's office, and the general manager was in on it too anyway, but he didn't like me. I said, this guy's trying to get me fired. And I said it right in front of him. I said, you put that in there intentionally. I'm done with you guys. I'm out of here. That's burning a bridge.
Okay, but the thing is that there's an excellent book. Every single person should read it. It's called The Asshole Survival Guide. Okay, it's by this guy. It says by this professor at Stanford. He must think I'm obsessed with him because it changed my life. Like I read it twice and I tell everybody to read it. Okay, so in this book, he says that when you're working in a toxic environment, you yourself become toxic, but you really
Mhm.
should not put up with toxic behavior. And
Yeah.
throughout the industry, there have been many stories like what you're talking about. Somebody comes to power and
Yeah.
then somebody else is associated with the previous person and then they get rid of them. And sometimes it's very hard to respond in a kind way because they really made you,
They
they put you in a
harden you.
corner.
They make you
Yeah.
hard too. They make you do adapt those
Right.
horrible things, habits, and what's the worst thing we can do? The worst instrument we have, our tongue, speaking. Man, just getting caught up in the gossip. Isn't that so
Right.
easy?
Yeah.
Oh, do you know what he did? Well, you know what? I heard it just explodes. And oh my gosh, I've been so guilty of that.
Well, yeah, we
Uh,
all, I mean, that's why, that's why people go to church and confess because,
yes, yes.
but yeah, because it says like, it's like a rudder on a huge ship. The tongue is like a rudder on a huge ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Oh,
the
I
thing
like
is
that.
that I think it,
I may use that in one of my
yeah, but
podcasts, by
that's
the way.
biblical though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That's okay, good. Okay.
But I like it though. Yeah.
Right, it's true. But the thing is that I think what's hard about the business, and that's why as you get older and wiser, you learn how to control it, is because you meet these
Yeah.
people who are abusive or whatever, and it's hard not to respond in kind and not to call them out.
Right.
Then when you're older, you think, okay, either I'm going to bail or I'm just going to hold my tongue, but there's a limit to what I'm going to put up with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And that's the thing, that's what always gets me in trouble is um when I get to that point, and I do, my wife Julie will tell you what a quick temper I have. I'm one of those quick temper explode, and then it's over 5 minutes later. I'm fine. And you're like, wait a minute, no, I'm still shell shocked from
right.
you screaming. It's silly. It's funny. I went to Father Peter, St. Clement, where I belong as a
Where's St.
parishioner.
Clement? Where's that?
It's in Lincoln Park here in Chicago. That's where Sharpie went from the Hawks, and also Jamal Mayer. Uh, he's the reason I became a member. That Jamal Mayer was a Chicago Blackhawk, by the way, not one of the bigger stars, but he still does commentary. But there was a homeless guy coming in. It was the first mass I went to before I was Catholic, and my wife took me there because she was Catholic, and we wanted to go to the school for our youngest. And this big guy's in front of me, shaved head, and this homeless guy comes in carrying a cat heading for the altar. And he gets up, and then Father Manny, who's very fit, they had to go and grab the guy and pick him up because he's about to put the cat on the altar. I don't know what he was going to do. And everybody's kind of freaking out. And so Jamal picks him up and he's carrying him. And first Jamal's coming to me and I go, oh my gosh, hey, Jamal Mayer.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And then I get up and Julie's like, what are you doing? Sit down. I said, no, I want to make sure he doesn't beat up the homeless guy. Because I knew this guy was having just what am I saying? A seizure, a moment. My brother's got mental issues, my next oldest brother. So I could recognize he was just schizophrenic and he was just having a moment. And he's probably off his meds. And so I got up. I said, no, I want to make sure they don't beat up the homeless guy. And Father Manny follows him out. We had several priests there that day. And so I go outside and Jamal is so sweet. And Father Manny, and this guy's dropping F-bombs and stuff, but then he calms down and he's got the cat and the cat gets away. And then the Chicago police officer comes. It's this woman. She was such a kind officer. And she says, okay, I'm going to have to put the handcuffs on you. Says, what about my cat? She says, I'll get your cat. And he said to her, are you lying? She says, I'm standing on the steps of this beautiful church. Do you think I would lie to you? And she was so sweet and everyone was so kind and just diffused the situation. I joined that day and started RCIA. And the amazing story I found out years later, that police officer was Catholic. She joined our parish for the same reason. She just felt that something.
Wow.
It's a weird story, I know, but that's how I became Catholic.
Well, it's not weird because there are a lot of stories like that, because if people are really living the faith, they make a difference,
Yeah.
whether
yeah.
it's Catholic or.
But Patrick Sharp belonged there, he and his wife and 2 daughters. And And Jamal and his kids, his wife and kids, went to the school there, and beautiful church, by the way. But anyway, I was talking about Father Peter, and I went to him after a football game. I said, because I'm a lector there, I do the readings at Mass. You have readings, and the
Are you talking
lector.
about, when you say Mass, are you talking about only Sunday Mass, or are you talking about daily?
No, daily Mass. This was a daily Mass, and I help out on the morning Mass. So I went back to the sacristy where the priest is at the beginning. We keep all the priest and Mass stuff back there in the sacristy. So I went back and I said, Father Peter, hey man, do I need to go to confession? I used the Lord's name in vain during the Bears game yesterday. And he goes, no, I saw that game. No, that's not, that wasn't intentional. So you're okay.
That's funny.
But seriously, I mean, you go for confession.
No, but I think when you become more aware of infractions or whatever, then you are very aware of what you're saying and what you're doing.
Absolutely. And you feel it as soon as you break one of those things, or it comes out, or you do something, you go, oh, why did I do that?
That's why I'm wondering, if you believe now what you believed back then, how would you proceed through the business? I know that you weren't corrupt, but I'm just wondering, how would you respond to people? Or
I wouldn't have been so promiscuous back then as I was. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. And
was that common? Was that common with people in the business back then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The business now is so different.
Oh yeah.
I don't know it as you're describing it. I have no idea. I like it. I like working in it. So
yeah, no, and it's totally different. Mary Ellen, our program director at the Mix for so many years, and now she works for Cumulus in Rhode Island. But she would tell me, she says, oh man, you and I are the same age, but I came into the business after all the fun stuff that you got to go through. Yeah. And it's true, because by the 90s, it was still fun, but totally different business. And the payola definitely was gone by then, or mostly gone by then.
Is this after the radio? Why do you think it disappeared, the payola?
Well, because the industry protected itself against it. So, before we could just say, oh, I'm playing this record, but there was no proof of it. You could just add it to your playlist to get the credit. Then they came out with monitoring, so they know exactly what hits are. And that's, Billboard charts, all those charts changed after that, because the charts before were just whatever program directors said they were playing. Then it became reality. It's like
the data was more digital data.
Yeah. And so that kind of cut it away. So you couldn't cheat as much anymore. And they just got wiser about it and weeded it out. And that's a good thing, that we don't have that. I don't think we do anymore. I mean, I'm sure it still exists to some extent, but not like it did back in the 80s. That's for sure.
Well, and also, I mean, I think that I'm sort of glad I wasn't in the business when it was more fun, because I was an idiot for several years. And so I would have done really stupid things. So I'm glad.
I am an idiot and still do many stupid things. So,
I would have done stuff so now but my thing is now is just like, I will not put up with toxicity, especially after I read that excellent book that everybody should read.
I'll have to read that.
The Asshole Survival Guide. And I know it's like he's an a-hole specialist in the workplace. But after you read that book, you will never put up with it again. I will not put up with it. Like, I've literally gone to people saying, you know what, I don't want to work here, and this is not acceptable. And they're like, wait, hold on. And then they negotiate with me. I think, okay, these people are good people.
Sure.
So, but I think if I were in it when you were in it, I don't think I would have had the discipline to do the right thing.
Oh, yeah. And I'll take a little credit for that I didn't get corrupt in that way. I just went out and partied all the time, No,
but that's what I mean. Like, I don't mean like necessarily a payola, but I just mean like accepting things that really aren't good in terms of treatment of people. Because I think I talked to somebody, now they won't go on the record, but they were saying that they did stuff they really regret, and they've been in the business many years, and they said, I really wish I didn't do certain things. Meaning like, you do certain things with somebody and then you're sort of rewarded for it. Like, that's sleazy.
Oh, yeah, that's horrible.
So,
yeah. No, I don't. not, I don't remember any situation like that, but I mean, because I was always in a good spot. I was very blessed, and I all thanks be to God. I was blessed through this business.
Well, what was it like to be at the same radio station for 20 years? You
It
said
was
you were at the
great.
mixer.
Yeah, I mean, that's security. I got a nice retirement with Bonneville before they sold to Hubbard. I was vested in them, and I've already started taking their retirement. Their guy was like, "Yeah, it doesn't run out. So, if you live to
Wow.
180, we'll pay you that long, so you might as well take it now if you
Oh
want."
my
I said,
gosh.
"Yeah, yeah, I'll
Wow.
take it." So I'm taking it now. But it was great because there was never security because, man, were we under pressure.
Mhm.
And and Barry James was hard, but he was good, and we became really good friends. In fact, the day he left, I said, "Man, I got to tell you, I'm so glad you're leaving." He goes, "What?" I said, "Now you and I can be friends." He's just started laughing. He says, "I just told Greg Salk that an hour ago." He said the same thing to Greg because he and Greg, were butting heads all the
Right.
time, and Greg was tough to work for at
Yeah.
that time.
Well,
Um,
I think it's tough because I mean, I never worked for him, or worked with these people, but I think sometimes it's tough because they have to make business decisions and they have to maintain sales, etc. So
yeah,
it puts them
yeah,
in a different position.
yeah. Well, there was a lot of pressure on us because we were successful at the mix.
Mhm.
That we had to keep it going, keep it going, keep it going.
Yeah.
Because that company, that station, and it still does make a ton of money. Not what it used to,
Right.
because revenues have gone down everywhere. But man, that was our big cash cow.
Well,
Although
see,
not
that's why.
Hubbard's biggest, but yeah.
Right. But see, that's why I think the commercial radio is so fascinating because you always have to respond to the market. And okay, I see people making decisions that I absolutely do not agree with that I think are completely
Yeah.
wasteful. And it really gets me upset, but I'm not in management, so I can't do anything about it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's fascinating to watch people try to find solutions for the market as opposed to public
Yeah.
radio. Public radio is fantastic.
Yes, it
Excellent,
is.
excellent
Yes.
content. But
Yeah.
they don't have to necessarily respond to the market because they get
Right.
donations. They have to be
Right.
responsible to their donors
Sure.
and the
Sure.
government because they get some government money. So
But, and they do it so well though.
very
NPR,
well,
come on,
very
how
well.
great is NPR? It's
Yeah, it's excellent. I mean, public radio is excellent, but it's got a
uh
different kind of approach.
yeah, yeah.
Then that's why I
And
find
it's
people who, yeah,
yeah, it's good. It's so good.
that's why I
I,
find people who are successful in commercial radio, they get my respect because they've had to find solutions that work.
and we still do. We still
Yeah.
are finding those solutions. And that's why you have people, oh, this will totally sound butt kissing that Greg, the reason they hired Greg and that he's overseeing our company now, he's good at finding different ways to do things and make money.
Are you
Not
sure you're
kissing
not
your
being?
butt. If you happen to see this, Greg, I'm not kissing your butt. Uh, but I respect the heck out of Greg because he is so sharp at what
Are you
he
sure you're not
does.
his PR guy?
Huh?
And this
I
is
am
why I'm
his
really
PR
interviewing
guy.
you is to promote
I've,
it.
to tell you the truth, that's my new job. Is no,
Right. He hired you
no, he's
personally.
he's good, and there are some good people, and we have some really sharp people at Odyssey now. Um, and by the way, so many of them, and I'm talking from the sales staff too, Sarah McMurray that's there now. All these people I worked with, and Paul Weber, who I mentioned, the marketing director for XRT. These were people that we all came from Bonneville and Hubbard.
Hmm.
They all shifted over. So yeah, there's some good people over there right
But
now.
wasn't Greg in charge of XRT for a while?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because Hubbard pushed him out, and man, he was great there. And I remember the last day he was there, I didn't even know we passed in the hall. I said, "Hey, Greg." He's like, "Hey." And I was like, swear he's not his usual jovial self. And he was already let go. And then he
And what was
came
he
over.
doing there? What was he doing there?
Oh, he was the national vice president of programming for the whole
Okay.
chain. Which is basically what he is here now, kind of, sort of, right? I don't even know what his actual
He's VP of something. I don't know.
VP of
It's like
something?
I'm so
Yes,
focused on my
that's
little
it.
myopic
VP of
world.
something.
Something important. Yeah. I'm focused on my little world. So no, but okay. Well, so what's it like to work in news radio, doing traffic and work in music radio? Like, what's the
Yeah.
difference?
Oh, well, because I have no experience at this.
Okay.
And people go, oh, you're doing traffic. Do you know how?
It's hard.
Okay. BBM, and I will brag about my coworkers, my reporters over at
Mhm.
BBM. Man, Bo Duran in the morning is a master
Yeah.
at that. And he's got a good personality. He's not a dull traffic reporter.
Right.
And I think that's the reason I was brought over here, a top 40 jock coming in to do reporting, just to add a little life to it. It's hard because we have like 15, and I mean 15 monitors, police, fire from different districts, IDOT, NDOT, and all these that we have to listen for crashes and for car chases and all these things. And then all these video monitors.
Mhm.
We have so many sources that we have to keep track with while we're reporting, because this is the most, now I really am selling, the most accurate traffic reporting anywhere, hands down in the country. I will guarantee you BBM's the best. And it's well thought out. They have worked at this for a long time. It's a hard job.
Mhm.
And it's been fun reinventing myself at 62 years old. Yes, old dogs can learn new
You're not
tricks.
old. Old to me is like 90. 62
Well,
is the new 40.
it's all mental anyway, right? I still act like a kid. Again, I'm married to a child psychologist. It works well. But it's such I love that I'm doing something new, totally new. And I'm having fun with it. I was on last night, 7 to midnight, reporting traffic. And, I had this, this is car fire. And then this semi caught fire underneath the Hubbard Street Tunnel. And, then we had this other wreck, and then a car chase over. And your adrenaline's running because you're trying to keep up with everything. And it was just fun. And I love working with the other reporters. Last night, one of my anchors was Varen Black, who works for us at BBF. She's awesome.
She sounds incredible.
Oh, she does. And the reason she and I work so well together, she's so exact. Okay, Brian, she'll go in the Brian, can you give me about 45 seconds on this one? And hit right at, 49 and 50 seconds. Yep, you got it. And, because she's so exact on hitting her times, and I am too. I'm very,
well, the clock there is very tight. No, the clock there is very tight.
Yes.
So
yeah, and I love to hit everything. I never show up late, knock on wood. I'm very exact with my time, and so is Varen. So we do so well with that. And then there's Jim Goodis. Oh, what a legend. Got to work with him last night, and just everybody.
And it's live. It's so fun. That's why I like it.
Yeah. It's all live, and you're dancing on your feet because you don't know what's going to happen next and how you're going to, because it is live, and stories and news happens live. It's whatever's going on. Mm-hmm. And it's exciting. I love it.
That's good. And then for music, you said, but what about, the quote unquote fun that you talk about back in the day? I know I'm obsessed with this fun concept because everybody tells me who's older. They always say, it used to be fun. It used to be fun. I'm like, I'm actually having fun. I'm having fun.
And I am still, I'll work, I'll be on today, 1 to 6 on 94.7 WLS, but I still love doing that. It's just back in the day when it was all live and it was all, you weren't owned by big corporations. Well, you were owned by corporations, but they didn't own that many stations, and there was true competition, man.
Yeah, that's what it is. So you're saying that radio used to be incredible because it was live. It was
more competitive because
it
wasn't watered down like it is now, where you have the same owner of all these different stations, and it's not as competitive as it was. So it's not as good as it was. It's kind of like having a monopoly, back when there was one cable company or one, whatever, and they had the monopoly of the business. And so they had these huge prices.
Mhm.
Well, same with radio, except that back when there was so much competition, you couldn't have the monopoly. You had to fight
Mhm.
every other station. You had to, get that audience. You had to be great. You don't have to be great anymore. You just
See,
have
I
to.
think you're the first person to tell me that it was the competition that made it so incredible, because that's why sports teams are exciting to watch. Sports teams that are really fighting. That's why I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not a sports person, but it's really
What?
fun to see. No, I love baseball. But the thing is, but even other sports too, you can tell, like for instance, college football, I think is really fascinating because
Yeah.
they
Oh,
have to win, they have to get noticed by the scouts, and there's
right.
an edge. It's so
Yes.
exciting.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Radio lost its edge. And the fact that it's just not as relevant today because of, new media, and that's going to happen anyway. But people don't realize, though, and I will tell you this about radio. If you look at the research, and we do a lot of it at Cumulus, and they send all that out to us, radio still rules. As far as media goes, radio rules. It's killing Sirius. It's not, Sirius does not have the big thing, or Pandora, or any, I don't know who's out there now, but none of them come close to the percentage of listenership
Hmm.
that radio still has
Hmm.
as um, a regular entity of airways that isn't digital. Radio still rules, and it's still out there. Now, it won't forever. It'll keep dwindling down, but it's still very prominent out there. It's just not as good as it was.